Hello and welcome to another episode of Mr. Stitch Films podcast, Creepy Corner. Our corner of the internet for an hour or so to talk all things creepy, weird and wonderful. I'm your host, Anthony M. Winson, and give a big creepy welcome to our first time co-host, Llewellyn.
Hello.
If you want to introduce yourself and say how we know each other?
Yeah, so I'm Anthony's brother-in-law. I've known you for, about 5 years now?
Yeah.
Not particularly connected to filmmaking or anything, but massive movie fan, particularly horror films and macabre stories of, the unexplained and mysteries and things like that.
But things that go bump in the night.
Things that go bump in the night, yeah.
Yeah. So on today's episode, we'll be discussing a favourite among hardcore horror fans, which is Tobe Hooper's infamous 1974 classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So just to give you a bit of insight for anyone living under a rock that doesn't know what this film is about, 5 friends head out to rural Texas to visit the grave of a grandfather. On the way, they stumble across what happens to be a deserted house, only to discover something sinister within, something armed with a chainsaw. This was written by Kim Henkel and Tobe Hooper, starring Marilyn Burns, Edwin Neal, Alan Danziger, Paul Partain, William Vale, Terry McMinn, Jim Sidow, and Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface. And the only reason I listed every name from the starring roles because I think everyone involved in that film deserves a shout out, really.
I think so. And there's not a huge cast.
Not a massive cast, no, but I think they all played such a pivotal part in pretty much all aspects of that film.
I think so. I thought Franklin was really good. The disabled brother.
Yeah, I think a lot of people hate him because of how whingy he is.
Yeah.
He just he just whinges a lot. And apparently Gunnar Hansen and Paul didn't get along on set.
Really?
Apparently they really hated each other. And then years later, Gunnar found out that it was because he was method acting, staying Franklin's role throughout the whole shoot.
Yeah.
And when they actually met years later, they became really good friends until he died.
Oh, nice end to the story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Their relationship, I suppose.
I mean, can you imagine for all those years having that sort of bad memory of doing something so iconic and then being like, oh, it's just because you were method acting and we didn't reach out to each other sooner.
Yeah.
So a lot of wasted years.
And I actually do think his acting was good in that. He was quite convincing as some disabled person.
Yeah.
So
do you remember the first time you watched TCM?
I do, actually. And I'm going to segue into your previous episode.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's not the previous one now, but The Exorcist episode when you were talking about banned movies in the 90s.
Yeah.
And that was what really inspired me to talk about this film, because The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of those films that was like an enigma at the time for me.
Yeah.
And, you hear about it in books about old films and Bizarre magazine and things, but this going back to when it was banned, these types of films just weren't around. Yeah, it was like the elusive kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre that has a reputation for being a really nasty horror film.
Yeah.
But trying to actually watch it is very difficult. So I had a friend in the 90s that was massively into horror films, and he had this on VHS.
Was this a pirate VHS?
It was a pirate VHS, yeah. Yeah, so he had it on VHS. He had a load of banned films that are probably not banned anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of them. And I can remember when I was a teenager, we'd get the videotape and go around to, he'd come around to my house or I'd go to his and we'd watch it. And we used to watch it a lot, it was back in the day as well where there was no Netflix or anything. So you only had a selection of whatever films that you had on video between your group of friends.
Yeah.
So you'd end up watching the same film loads of times. And this was one of those things where when I was a teenager, I watched it loads. And then I had to watch it earlier this week because I've not seen it for about 20 years.
It's kind of crazy when you think of, when you rewatch it in today's standards, how tame a film it is.
Yeah.
And it was banned.
Yeah.
And you kind of, a lot of modern audiences will probably be like, I've seen a lot worse. Why was this banned?
Yeah, in terms of gore or even the subject matter. But for some reason, there's a lot of films that are a lot more extreme in just the subject matter, with, I don't know, rape or...
Yeah. I Spit on Your Grave.
I Spit on Your... Well, that's another older film, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you can kind of understand why it was banned at the time in the UK. It was a pretty, in the context of 1974, it was quite an extreme film, I'd say.
Well, we as British people are known for being prudish, aren't we? So if you throw something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre into the mix in the early 70s, there's going to be a lot of outcry.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. But yeah, I can't actually remember the first time that I watched it. I can't actually remember. But I could probably say that it was 94, 95 maybe, something like that. So I would have been 14 at the time.
Yeah.
And I would have been watching it on like a 14-inch CRT TV and an old VHS player.
There's a lot of people probably listening now going, what's a CRT TV?
With a tiny, one tiny mono speaker.
Yeah. So I remember when I was quite young, my brother brought a poster for it from Blockbusters.
Yeah.
And I just remember seeing the iconic poster of, Leatherface.
Who will survive and what will be left of them.
Yeah.
With Pam on the hook.
Yes.
In the kitchen, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember saying to him, like, oh, what's this film? I would love to see what it is. And he was like, oh, it's a fake film. It's not real. Because obviously he didn't want to help me find it or whatever, And then like years later, when I got a bit older, Channel 4 was showing it for like the first time. I think it was since it had been released or whatever, which would have been about 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my dad, oh, this film's on Channel 4 that was banned, and haha, you can't stop me from watching it. You said I can't watch The Exorcist, haha, but this is on Channel 4. You can't stop me, so I'm going to record it and watch it.
Yeah.
And he was like, speak to me like that again, and I'll take your TV out of your room. And I was like, okay, never mind. And I think I remember watching it and not particularly enjoying it, thinking, what was the fuss about?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. But then as I got older and watched it again, it kind of became a favourite around Halloween time, especially because, like I mentioned to you before we started recording, it's a very visceral film to watch. And it almost feels like a snuff film because of how low budget it is and how grimy it all feels. And
yeah, it's really grainy and the audio is not great on it.
Yeah.
It does feel quite real, really, doesn't it? The way that it's shot, it's got a feeling.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost argue that it's very kind of found footagey.
Yeah,
the way
that's what I was going to say. It's a bit like a found footage type.
Yeah, because it is kind of like a fly on the wall sort of thing, and like because of how hot it was in Texas when they were filming it, everyone's sweaty and like there's the meat. It just kind of it's like you can smell the film.
Yeah,
and if you could smell a film, it would smell bad. I know that's really random to say.
I know what you mean. It would. It'd smell like rancid meat, wouldn't it?
Yeah, basically. Because obviously 1970s was like the height of exploitation films around that time. And when I was researching it, I was just thinking the state of America, especially at the time, was so many high-profile serial killers at the time. Like you had Jeffrey Dahmer, you had Zodiac Killer, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and then you had the Vietnam War going on.
Yeah.
And so death was just everywhere in that time period.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I did do some reading up today before the podcast, and apparently the film was, according to Toby Hooper, apparently it was a response to being lied to by the government about Vietnam and Watergate and the oil crisis and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be like all of the bad things about America manifested in a man, i.e. Leatherface.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one. And what you were saying about it being hot as well, I think because it was a low-budget film and they were using rented equipment, they only had a short space of time to film it, so they were doing like really long days.
Yeah.
7 days a week of like 12 to 14 hours of shooting.
Yeah.
So they probably were all feeling sweaty and hot and bothered and a bit rank. And that kind of comes across in the film as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
You get that sense of, I don't know what you'd sort of say really, it's like a claustrophobia and feeling uncomfortable. And
it was guerrilla filmmaker. And I know that the actor Paul, who plays Franklin, was saying that they weren't being paid on time. And the scene where Joe and the lorry goes by and it knocks him down the embankment.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
He said when he was shooting that scene, he wasn't going to. He was like, no, I'm not filming anymore until you pay me.
Yeah.
And Toby, I think it was either Toby or Kim, basically wrote him a check and was like, this is what we owe you. So he put it in his pocket, and as he rolled down that hill, he had the check in his chest pocket. And apparently it was the last thing he filmed as well.
Was it? Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Like, he came to a sticky end, didn't he? Can you remember how he died?
Who, Franklin?
Franklin, yeah. That's another thing that kind of, I guess, makes the film quite extreme, or whatever you want to call it, is the fact that there is a scene where a disabled person gets chewed up by a maniac with a chainsaw.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the first real jump scares, really, in like horror, because horror didn't really have jump scares, and that is a damn effective jump scare.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think because she's pushing him in the wheelchair for so long, and you just feel for her because she's struggling so bad, pushing that damn wheelchair through the thicket of the forest, and he's moaning, and then you kind of like, oh, you're really feeling for her, and then suddenly out pops Leatherface, and he's like, I'll do you a favour, I'll just cut him up for you.
Yeah.
Either make him lighter for you to carry, or
On the subject of using power tools as a weapon, I was trying to think of films that were earlier than TCM.
Yeah.
Where there was a murderer with a power tool.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's many. I can't think of one.
No, so I was trying to think, like, immediately what comes to my head is, like, Slum Party Massacre and Driller Killer. I think they were 80s.
Yeah, Driller Killer was 79, I think.
Was it 79?
Yeah, I think so.
TCM was definitely a trendsetter.
It was like an early iconic slasher film type.
Yeah. I remember Toby Hooper saying that he was in line to buy something, and it was a really long queue.
Yeah.
Have you read this?
I've read it, yeah.
And
I know what you're going to say. It was in a hardware store.
Yeah, and he was like, if only I could get through this line quicker, and saw a chainsaw and was like, if I picked that up, I could mow all these people down and get to the checkout quicker.
Yeah.
And that's where he decided Leatherface should have a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Which, kind of wonder what's going on in Toby Hooper's head.
Yeah.
I mean,
a bit of a strange one, isn't it?
I mean, do you know where the concept of Leatherface came from?
What, the Ed Gein? Do you mean like the Ed Gein thing?
Yeah. So I obviously I knew a lot about Ed Gein before the podcast because of my fascination with TCM growing up and things like that. I mean, I don't know how much of it you know about, but I was going to go into a bit of it now. So if anyone doesn't know who Ed Gein is, he was a man in the 50s. He lived on a farm with his drunken, violent father and his woman-hating, Bible-bashing mother.
Yeah.
And his brother Henry. His father ended up dying of heart failure and left him and his brother with their mom. And apparently she used to like recite Bible verses to them all the time. She like really seemed to hate women, really hated them.
Hated women, yeah.
Yeah. And then one day there was a big fire at their farm, and the fire brigade came, put it out, and then Ed reported that his brother was missing. They were like, oh, that's weird. So they went to look for him and found him face down dead. And they thought he died of heart failure. And then an investigation on his body, they found bruising on his head. So they thought it was asphyxiation, and they sort of just ruled it out, which is quite odd because a lot of people said Ed was a very strange boy growing up.
Yeah.
And then, you got to look at like the way his mother was with him. And it was found out that apparently Henry, the other brother, said something bad about their mom. So speculation, as you will, because no one officially knows.
Yeah.
His mum died not long after from a stroke, which left Ed alone, and he started to seal off all the rooms in the house.
Yeah.
He was always obsessed with his mum anyway. And then November 16th, 1957, a 58-year-old hardware store owner, Bernice Warden, disappeared. And her son was the sheriff. He was Frank Warden. And he went to visit his mum in the hardware store. And she was missing. And the only thing he could see was some blood on the floor. And he checked the receipts because no one had seen her all day. And the last person that she wrote a receipt for was Ed for some antifreeze. He's not very clever, is he, Ed? So the sheriff went to Ed's farm and arrested him. And they started to investigate his farm. And one of the deputies went into the barn and he felt something brush against him and looked up, and it was the decapitated remains of the store owner Bernice.
Yeah.
And she had been hung up, cut down the middle, horrendous like basically.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Just basically he put her on display like you would of like, I don't know, a cow or a sheep or something.
It was basically like taxidermy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he was making things like lampshades out of human skin.
Yeah.
And I think there was a belt that was made out of nipples or something. Like all this weird. And that is just like the scene at the start. Kirk goes into the house.
Yeah.
And Leatherface clobbers him.
Yeah.
And then Pam goes in afterwards, and it's Pam that goes into that room that's got all of the...
Yes, it is.
All of the things that are made out of human bones and whatnot. But yeah, that's totally influenced by Ed Gein.
Massively. I mean, when they went into his house, they found like a wastebasket of human skin covering chairs, skulls as bedposts, female skulls on tops of sawn off beds, skulls being used as ashtrays, and like a lot of gruesome, horrible stuff in his house. And then they found a body skin, a woman skin, as Ed apparently said. He wanted to be his mom.
Yeah.
So he was making a outfit to wear. So I'm guessing that would be where Leatherface got his iconic mask from.
Yeah,
was
I
the
think
idea
so.
that Ed was potentially wearing skin.
Yeah.
I mean, no one officially has said they saw him, but it was speculated that Ed would put this woman's suit on and go and dance outside.
Yeah.
That's horrendous. Like, do you know what? I think I'd be scarred for life if I saw that.
In the 50s as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was late 50s.
Late 50s, early 60s. I don't know when he got caught, but...
It was 1957 because that was when the sheriff discovered that his mum was missing, and that's when he would have been arrested.
Yeah.
He died of lung cancer in 1984.
I didn't realise that.
They thought he wasn't sane enough to stand trial, but then other people did an investigation on his mental health.
Yeah.
And basically said, no, he's fine, he can stand trial. And they did. And he was just basically, he stayed in prison and then he went to a hospital in the 80s and then died of lung cancer.
Wow.
He was buried next to his family. He's now in an unmarked grave, I'm guessing, to keep weirdos that are obsessed with that kind of stuff away.
Just on the subject of serial killers as well, there was another one that's lesser known that influenced Kim Henkel. The actual serial killer was called Dean Corll, Corll.
Right.
And he basically killed 28 boys between 1970 and 1973. So that was happening when TCM was probably in its gestation period, when they're talking about ideas and writing it, basically.
Yeah.
But that was in Texas. That was a pretty grim story. There's a young teenager called Elmer Wayne Henley. And apparently this serial killer, Dean Corll, used to pay him to find him children. So actually, Elmer's still alive. I think Dean Corll died like 20 years ago or something. But yeah, it's just a story about a serial killer in Texas where there was a teenage boy that was essentially finding victims for this serial killer that would then take the victims, pay him, and...
It's mental. What was it about the 70s that had so many serial killers?
I don't know. It's weird, isn't it?
I mean, there's always been psychopaths and things like that. But when you look at 1970, there were so many, and it's absolutely mental. Like, what was it? Was it the outcry from flower power from the 60s? People feeling more free, so they felt that they could go on and murder people.
I don't know.
I mean, when you look at the list, there is a massive abundance of killers.
A huge surge. Yeah, there's a huge surge.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the 80s, because I think Dahmer was mid to late 80s. He was a little bit later, wasn't he?
Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah. It's partially 70s.
Was it? Yeah, late
70s. Through 70s. I did look up earlier, and I'm sure he was caught in the late 70s, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
And same as John Wayne Gacy.
John Wayne Gacy. There was the Night Stalker.
The Night Stalker.
Richard Ramirez.
I think, he was 80s, and he freaks me out. He is the one serial killer out of all of them that... Because there was no rhyme and reason or pattern to his murders. Yeah. Like, you could be a child, male, female, grandmother, grandfather. He didn't discriminate against anybody.
No.
Like, he would he'd break into your house and you were done for.
Yeah.
And I think I have a fear of that myself, of being in bed and someone breaking into the house.
In the house, yeah.
So, and I think just knowing about the Night Stalker and Richard Ramirez terrifies me.
Yeah,
he is one that really gets under my skin. No pun intended there.
It does seem to be in America as well, in particular.
Yeah,
it?
We've had a few in the UK, but nothing like America.
No, nothing like America. But then I suppose there's more people in America.
There is, yeah. So. I suppose like the footfall of how many serial killers you'd bump into compared to the UK is probably quite obviously a lot higher.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. It is the thing about the coming into the 70s from the flower power era as well. It's funny that you should mention that, because I get that sense of, when they're all in the camper van kind of thing, driving around at the start.
Yeah.
That's kind of got a feeling of 1960s optimism. Yeah. Where they're like, I don't know, in the sunshine and travelling around together and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that was a deliberate kind of...
Just some young teenagers just going to do whatever it is they were supposed to... Well, they were visiting the grave, weren't they, really? Yeah. But, optimistic, got the futures ahead of them.
Yeah. And they're just all out having fun. And it sort of looks a little bit 60s. And the start of... Not a lot happens in the start of the film, does it? Mainly they're just sort of driving around and they pick the hitchhiker up, who's a complete weirdo.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe TCM has a lot to answer for people not wanting to pick up hitchhikers as well.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, because wasn't the hitchhiker Leatherface's brother?
Yeah.
And the guy in the gas station as well was his dad, I think, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah.
Because it never makes it completely clear.
No, they're kind of like a very cannibalistic family.
Yeah.
The thing I found funny when I was looking it up today, I had heard it before, was the narrator of the famous intro to the film. Apparently he was paid with a joint.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think,
interesting.
Yeah, could you imagine that being this iconic voice, not even getting paid for it? You're just like, here's a spliff, like, enjoy, thank you for doing this. And you're like, I got scammed on that, really, didn't I?
It was funny, wasn't it? The way it was intentional misinformation about the film being true at the start as well.
Yeah, I think that played into a lot of probably why it was so successful at the time as well.
Yeah, because the internet wasn't around.
No.
It would be easy for a rumour to be spread about it being,
oh,
it's a true story. And
yeah, I mean, they were marketing it as based on true events. And obviously, it doesn't mention Ed Gein anywhere in it. So that people wouldn't have made that connection of, it's based on Ed Gein. It's not really, true. Probably a lot of people are like, well, who is this psycho with a chainsaw that gets away at the end?
Yeah, because that's the other thing. He does get away at the end.
Yeah. Which is kind of crazy, because the thing that I find upsetting is, Terry McKinn, when she gets put on the meat hook?
Yeah.
Apparently, the longest she could stay on that meat hook was 1 minute. To comfortably be in the harness that they created for her was 1 minute.
Really? Yeah.
Because it was excruciatingly painful. And I remember hearing that with the remake, the guy that gets put on the meat hook in the remake, he said the same thing. It was so incredibly uncomfortable. Because I suppose you've got your entire weight on your groin.
Yeah.
So that is going to hurt. And I remember he said, if you take me down, I'm not getting back up. So you need to shoot what you need to shoot, because I'm not coming down.
I'm not going back on it again.
Yeah. And I'm guessing it was the same with Terry McMinn.
Yeah.
The fact she was so uncomfortable. I think she said that pretty much she was like, I don't want to keep doing this over and over again, so you need to get what you need to get.
Yeah, well, I did hear that Tobe Hooper mistreated a lot of the cast.
That wouldn't
throughout
surprise
the film,
me.
like, working them really hard. And I think the scenes in the third act where the granddad's sucking a finger.
Yeah.
I think there's something that happened where it was the fake blood kept on drying or something like that.
So they actually cut.
They just cut a finger.
Yeah, which is horrendous. You'd never get away with something like that today.
No.
Because the guy, John Duggan, who played the grandpa, he was 21 at the time of playing it, because he had to go through masses of prosthetic makeup.
Yeah, latex face or whatever,
And apparently it took hours and hours, and it was blistering heat. I think it said online it was always around about 100 degrees.
Yeah.
The hottest summer that they had in a long time. And he was under that prosthetics and clothes and stuff in that dining room scene for so long that it was almost like torture. He said he hated it.
Yeah.
Because he said with that as well, he was like, you need to film this all now, like within the time frame that I'm in this, because I will not get back into this.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably was a form of torture.
It probably, I would imagine that was really, really tough to film that film.
Yeah. So. I mean, do you know about the table scene?
No, tell me about it.
Like, because it was so hot, the bones and the meat and everything was real.
Yeah.
And basically, it was all decomposing in that room. And because they had the heat of Texas at the time, and they had the big lamps, because obviously they weren't LED.
Yeah.
Like cooking the meat as well.
Yeah.
At the same time as doing this scene, which was taking hours and hours and hours. And apparently, the food was rotting. The smell of it.
I bet it was disgusting.
They said crew members were passing out from the smell of it.
Yeah.
Of not just the meat, but the body odor of everybody.
Yeah.
And they were saying people were vomiting. They were passing out. Edwin Neal, who played the hitchhiker, claimed that filming that scene was the worst time of his life. And he had been in the Vietnam War where people were trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And he said that's how bad that scene was to film.
Wow. I can imagine it was horrendous. Here's an interesting fact. Apparently, Guillermo del Toro became a vegetarian after seeing that film. Did you hear about that?
It kind of sounds familiar. And do you know what? It really doesn't surprise me at all.
It was, there's a lot of rancid meaty type stuff in it.
Yeah. I mean, there's like maggots and all sorts. And I think when, like you said, when she first comes across that room, you just know that stinks. Like that house just stinks.
Stinks, yeah.
And a thing that makes me laugh as well is the house that they used for filming that is now a beautiful bed and breakfast.
I heard that, yeah.
Could you imagine going into that house after seeing that film, being like, oh, it's quite charming in here?
I wonder if they've still got the metal shutter.
That'd be hilarious. Coming to like this white picket fenced house, and then there's like this meat shutter down the hallway.
That was the one scene that scared me the most in that film. as a teenager was the scene where I keep forgetting his bloody name. Kirk goes into the house and he can hear the pig noises.
Yes. Yeah. Because obviously, as an audience, we know nothing's. No, we don't know what's coming.
Yeah, you're thinking, what's that?
Yeah.
What's that strange? Is there a pig in the house?
Yeah.
And then it's Leatherface. I think that's like Leatherface he's portrayed in the film as having learning difficulties, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I think he's like mimicking his prey, making that noise.
Yeah.
They treat humans like cattle, like slaughtering cattle in it.
I suppose, yeah. He's luring him in by making pig noises because. If he's got his chainsaw going, someone's not going to be running into the house to find out what the chainsaw is. A pig, it's like, oh, maybe there's a pig's gone here. Maybe I can go and help this pig.
Well, they do pig calling in Texas, don't they? Have you seen those videos?
Yeah.
Well, they have like pig calling competitions. Yeah. So yeah, it's just very, very strange. But it's almost like Leatherface can't differentiate between killing a human, as a sentient being that is human, or whether it's an animal or whatever. But yeah, I just find it's that particular scene I found really creepy.
It is because it's sort of there's not any music to that scene when he hits him with the hammer and his death rattle, and then he drags him in, just slams that door, and that's when the cue of the music comes in, and it kind of leaves you like, what did I just witness? What just happened?
Yeah.
Like, oh my god!
And it's quite far. The image of that murder happening is quite far field in the shot, like it's not close up.
Yeah.
So you can't, and it's a really grainy picture quality.
Yeah.
So you don't
the redness of the wall behind him always stands out in my head as as a picture in my head when you think of Texas Chainsaw, like that red room.
The red room behind, door. Because I think that is there a load of like stags' heads and stuff.
Yeah.
On it, isn't there, like a game trophies sort of thing?
Yeah, that always stands out with not just the wall, but like her hot pants, how red they are.
Yeah.
Like the red tones in that film are just like...
They pop, don't they?
They do.
It's deliberately made, I think, for them to pop out.
Yeah. That shot, though, when she gets off the hammock and walks to the house, the cinematography on that shot is just chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Like, really is such a good shot.
Yeah, it
for
is.
a low budget, fly the wall, like, guerrilla filmmaking. And I mean, they wouldn't have pre-planned any of the cinematography. They wouldn't have had storyboarding for it.
No, definitely not.
So, the person that came up with that shot, it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's right, because she's sitting on that swing chair, isn't
it? Yeah.
And she's sat on it looking at the porch of the house.
Just wondering, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, wondering where he is.
Yeah.
And then she slowly walks up and the camera sort of follows her into the house from behind.
Yeah, her behind.
Yes.
I mean, probably not intentional for all the male viewers that are watching in the 70s at all.
Not at all. With the really low cut back as well, she basically looks like she's not got a top on.
Yeah. I mean, and when she gets spiked, I don't know if you feel it, but because her back is so exposed, you don't see the spike go in, but because it's so close and you see her skin and the hook close to her skin, like when he puts her on, you can see it in your head.
You can, yeah. And the hook's so massive and it's really...
I mean, I don't know whether or not it would, but the size of the hook, whether or not it would actually have come through you. I'm glad they didn't do something like that because I think it adds more to it, just like her reaction, just seeing her hanging there.
It makes you think about what would happen. I think it'd get stuck under your shoulder blade.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, the pain would be horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether or not your endorphins would eventually kick in and you wouldn't really feel it after so long, but it would be horrible because, I mean, your whole weight on that hook, just pushing up into your, oh, no.
Then she ends up in the freezer and she's still alive in the freezer, isn't she?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's like a death rattle sort of thing.
Is that what it is?
I think so. Yeah. But, yeah, that was... Yeah, horrible.
Well, apparently, I was just doing a little bit of research on it. 1974, it had a $140,000 budget.
Yeah,
and it was cheap. And so in today's money, that's $900K basically.
I mean, even by today's standard, that for a movie, is cheap.
It is cheap, but it was the 15th highest grossing film in 1974.
Wow!
So it made its money, didn't it?
It was
got the job done.
It was a hit.
But I had a look at all of the different actors, and the hitchhiker, Edwin Neal, he's the most prolific actor out of all of them. And he's still acting now. He was in a short film this year.
Oh, really?
But the others, they didn't really do a lot. Marilyn Burns was like a 70s and 80s horror queen. She was in a lot of B-movie type films.
She died not that long ago. I think was it 2012,
2014, I think.
2014. And same Gunnar died, I think, 2015 as well.
But Toby Hooper's, is he alive?
No, I think he died not that long ago.
Did he?
Yeah.
Because I think he was involved with the 2003 remake, I think.
Yeah, I think he was, him. And I don't know, was Kim alive still? I'm not sure. I think they were quite involved in the remake.
It's weird to think it's 50 years old as well. Because if I watched it in, let's say, 94, it was only 20 years old at that point.
Yeah.
So me watching the original TCM in 94, it would have been a newer film than me watching the 2003 remake now.
Yeah.
Which would still seem like a modern film.
Don't even. No.
Do you know what I mean? It's
like, I didn't think about that. But then I thought about that, sideline, Halloween.
Yeah.
So Halloween H2O, when that was made, that was to celebrate the 20th anniversary.
I saw that at the cinema.
Now Halloween H2O is now 24 years old.
99, was it?
99.
98, 99.
Yeah, oh no, it's even older now than when they made that for the anniversary, the first.
Yeah.
And I just think that's mental, because I remember when it came out, because I didn't know much about Halloween, but I remember when it came out in 98, and I remember reading that it was to commemorate the 20th anniversary, but then now that 20th anniversary film is older than when they were making it, which is just baffling. It just goes to show how fast time goes.
I know, it's weird, isn't it?
But for you to say that, when you watched the original in 94, it was 20 years old, and now in today's standard, it's the same age as the remake.
Yeah.
That's mental.
Yeah.
I didn't even make that connection when I was thinking about this podcast. That makes you feel so old.
It does make you feel old. Because I went to the cinema to see... I saw Halloween H2O at the cinema, but I saw the 2003 TCM remake at the cinema as well. And I felt like an adult when I went to see that film. So
I can imagine. I mean, it's an 18, so how old were you in... Because it was
21.
21 was it?
Yeah, 21. I was born in 82, so it wasn't a very old film at all at the time when I was born. Another
bit of trivia, which I thought was quite horrendous. Apparently, Marilyn Burns, when she was running through the trees and the undergrowth and things like that, apparently she sustained so many cuts from the bushes and thorns and things like that. Apparently, a lot of the blood on her clothing was real.
Really?
Apparently, yeah.
I actually, on the subject of that, I heard that Gunnar Hansen could outrun her.
Yes.
So even
in his wedge shoes to make him taller, he could still outrun her.
Yeah. So in that scene, he was having to arse around and not fully chase her, kind of thing.
Yeah, and cut things like, oh, come on, woman, get moving.
Yeah.
I mean, he seemed like a tall man anyway, and then he had these wedges to make him bigger.
Yeah. He was an absolute unit, wasn't he, in that film?
Yeah, he was. Absolutely. And then they also said that, when she jumps out the window at the end to escape, they didn't want her to do that because they didn't want her to injure herself, so they had a stunt double do the jump.
Yeah.
And then they basically made a platform just outside the window for her to, jump from to the floor to capture that.
Yeah.
She apparently hurt her ankle severely doing that
small one. Yeah.
So you were like, oh, do you know what? We should have just made her jump through the bloody window. Yeah. And then that ending as well, just of them chasing her down, and she's just wanting to run for her dear life. I mean, I know Carla says there's a lot of screaming in that film. I think she's just almost lost it by the end, though, of having to witness your brother being slaughtered, these weird people taking you hostage, feeding you to their grandfather to wake him up.
Yeah. And when the grandfather's trying to hit her over the head as well.
Yeah.
That's a horrible...
You kind of want her to fight back at that point as well, because
she's got hardly any energy.
I mean, watching it, that's the other thing I feel like when you watch the original, you are exhausted by the end as well. You feel like you have gone through what she's gone through at the same time.
It does have that effect, and the screaming really does intensify the anxiety, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that also, it possibly adds to you being tired, because listening to her scream so much, you're drained from hearing her scream so much.
Yeah.
So you really feel for her when she's getting her head smashed with that mallet, and you're just like, oh, come on.
I know, yeah.
Yeah,
it's horrible. And the scene as well where she manages to escape and goes to the gas station.
Yeah.
And then she gets attacked by the dad with the broom, doesn't she? And put in that sack.
So unfair.
Yeah.
You think, oh my God, salvation for her.
Yeah.
And I think it's got to be one of the first of its kind to do that. You think she's got away, she's going to be rescued. Oh no, he's part of it.
Yeah.
Though he doesn't like killing, does he? He's not for him. He never had the stomach for it.
No, that's right.
So he just hits her with a broom.
Well, I think there's a thing in the film where the hitchhiker, some of the dialogue's a little bit difficult to pick up on. You have to listen quite hard because there's a lot of shouting going on and stuff. But as I understand it, the reason that Leatherface started killing everybody is because the hitchhiker was supposed to be looking after him.
Right.
And he didn't. He wandered off to that abattoir.
Yeah.
Because there's a scene in, I can't remember whereabouts it is in the film, but basically the dad is shouting at the hitchhiker saying, "Oh, you shouldn't have left your brother."
Yes.
And yeah, it's basically he was supposed to be monitoring.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing is like, why did he wander off to that abattoir? There's a few things in the film that are just slightly disturbing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, like why the hitchhiker was hanging around that abattoir, and it's like they were
head cheese.
Head cheese, yeah.
Yeah, it's just grim. It really is just grim.
That was a working title of the film, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, I don't think it would have done as popular if it was called Head Cheese.
Head cheese, no.
Yeah, I think it would have. Yeah,
Leatherface, it might have.
Well, they did do a sequel many years later called Leatherface. I've not watched that one though. Have you ever seen any of the sequels to it?
Wasn't the one with Dennis Hopper in it?
That's the second one.
Yeah, I've not seen any of the 80s sequels. The only ones that I've sort of seen are the remakes, so like the 2003 and then...
I think I've just about seen them all except Leatherface.
Yeah.
The second one is... It has its moments of being okay, but they kind of leaned into dark comedy.
Yeah.
Which I'm not a big fan of horror comedy.
Yeah.
I don't know. For some reason, if I'm going to watch a horror film, I kind of want it to be horror, not be laughing.
I know what you mean. Sometimes it works though, doesn't it?
There are instances. I think it's if you're going into a horror film that's more comedy central, say like Cabin in the Woods and things like that. It's got to be very cleverly written and directed to be pulled off. I'm not sure whether Toby Hooper came back for the sequel. I don't think him and Kim wanted to. It was directed, I think, by somebody else. But yeah, at the end of it, Dennis Hopper and Leatherface have a chainsaw fight. And
that's just a bit silly.
It is. Yeah. But then the third one, they kind of got rid of all that comedy aspect of it. And what's his name? It's going to come to me later. He's quite a famous actor now. He was in Lord of the Rings, I think. Yeah, so he's like the hitchhiker, and they go to like the house, and it's a completely different family, but still Leatherface, and they've got their own sort of mechanics, and it's got Thingy from Dawn of the Dead in it. Oh my god, names are evading me at the moment. He was in Kenan and Kel and whatnot.
The later Dawn of the Dead, not the original.
The original Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, the original Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, and basically, like he helps the girl who's captive in their house. And yeah, it's just a very violent. Like they nail her hands to like the chair and stuff, and it started to be Ken 4.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the other guy was Viggo Mortensen.
Oh, Viggo Mortensen, yeah. Mortensen,
yeah,
whatever his name is.
And I think the third one gets really bad rep from people, but I think it's actually a pretty decent film.
Yeah,
it's a Leatherface sequel anyway. I think it's gritty again. It's dark, and I thought it was really good. The fourth one, which was Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, I think it works better in the horror comedy.
I've never even heard of that film.
Have you not? Oh,
no.
My God.
It must have been, late 90s?
Yeah. Apparently, Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey have said that basically they had like this trailer Winnebago sort of thing, and that was like the green room for everybody. It was super low budget. Yeah. That was written and directed by Kim Henkel.
Was it? Yeah.
And Leatherface is like a woman in it. Like he literally wears a woman's dress, wig, you name it, like full on woman sort of thing, and towards the end of the film. And
sorry to interrupt you. That's a bit like going back to the Ed Gein influence. Yeah. Because in the 1974 film, there's a bit where he puts lipstick and makeup on.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a nod towards the Ed Gein obsession with his mother.
It's kind of like they didn't want to fully go into it in the original, and this one, Kim was like, "We're doing it."
Yeah.
And it has got very comical elements to it, but it works better than the proper sequel, the original sequel. It's not a good film. It's very bad. Like Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey have really like gone, no, we have nothing to do with this, because they were releasing, I think it was Scream Factory, were releasing an anniversary Blu-ray edition of it, and they had someone create the artwork, and it had Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger on the front, and it had all been drawn, really cool artwork, and it was like, oh, we've delayed it because they had to remove their faces from the artwork.
Really?
Even though they're in the film.
I just wanted to erase it from there.
Yeah, pretty much, because it ended up with 2 releases. So it had a limited release in 1995 through Columbia Pictures, and that was super limited. And then when Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey became bigger names in 96 through Jerry Maguire and Time to Kill, they renamed it Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Next Generation and shoved it into cinemas again.
Yeah.
And again, it didn't do very well. It sort of like disappeared. It has a big cult following, the fourth one has, though.
Yeah.
I think because of how campy and silly it is.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have the two remakes with the first one with Jessica Biel and the second one with Matt Bomber.
Yeah. The
second one's okay. Have you seen the one with Matt Bomber?
I don't know if I've seen it. I probably have seen it. Is it the one about podcasters or something that turned
No, that's the latest one that we had with Netflix. The one with Matt Bomber.
Sorry to interrupt you. Has that got a scene where Leatherface gets on a bus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen that one.
Yeah, that one was a couple of years ago with Netflix.
Yeah.
So in 2003, there was the one with Jessica Biel, and then because it did so well, they decided to do a prequel to it.
Yeah.
And that had Matt Bomber in it, and he and his brother are on leave for Vietnam, I think it is.
Yeah.
But then they get caught by the sheriff, and it's pretty much the same film as the 2003 remake. But I knew from watching it, because it was a prequel, that everyone had to die. So I wasn't as invested in the characters.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you always kind of want to root for a character to survive in a horror film. And if you know they're all going to die, then you kind of can't feel connected to them because you just know that there's no point.
Yeah.
And then after that was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D, and that was 2012, I think it was.
I might have seen it. I don't know. Sometimes they blend into one another.
Yeah.
All the different remakes and stuff.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D, all intents and purposes, it was okay. Like, they messed up the timeline massively because it was meant to be a direct sequel to the original.
Yeah.
And some woman takes a baby and steals it from the soy house to raise it as we don't want this baby to be brought up in this community, whatnot. They kill everyone, or so they think. And then it's modern day, and this baby is now 18.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, the beginning was 1974. How is this baby only 18 in modern day?
Yeah.
Like, she should be 40 something.
Yeah, yeah.
And then she inherits this house, and Leatherface has been kept in the basement, basically, and she gets let out and goes on a murder spree.
You know what? I have seen that.
It's at the end where she goes, "Do your thing, cuz."
I remember now. Now you've said that about her inheriting the house. I remember it.
It has the worst line ever. Like, I think they're going for like this badass moment where she slides his chainsaw to him to help him out, and goes, "Do your thing, cuz," and it's just really cringe and cheesy, and like she's got like boob tape on her top, so her top doesn't move over her breasts.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, yeah, what? You should have just left her top closed, because it's so obvious that obviously she doesn't want to show her breast, which is fine.
Yeah,
but to make it that obviously she's got boob tape on it, it's just hilarious. And then there was Leatherface, which I never saw, which again was another prequel.
Yeah,
and then there was the Netflix Texas Chainsaw, and again had some good moments in it. But overall, just no. I don't know, because they tried to do the whole Halloween thing where they brought back Sally.
Yeah.
For like the badass showdown, but then they didn't do anything with her. I don't know if you felt it watching, because it was a few years ago now. They brought her back for like this badass showdown with him, but then nothing happens.
I can't really remember it.
Like, and then he kills her.
Yeah.
And it's like, why bring back a legacy character like that in this big hype just to kill her in the way that you did?
Strange, that is, isn't it?
Yeah, I felt like the character of Sally was done a disservice, like a disjustice, like massively on that.
I thought you mentioned about Halloween. A remake that I really enjoyed was the Rob Zombie Halloween remake.
I like it.
You know where it goes really into detail about, what's his name, Michael Myers' childhood, where he starts killing animals, and then he ends up in a psychiatric hospital.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a really good film.
Well, it depends which version of it you watch. And again, with the sequel of that, because I don't know if you ever watched the Rob Zombie sequel, if you watch the director's cut, it's so much better than the theatrical cut because it was panned massively. And it was just the Weinsteins. I think it was the Weinsteins getting involved, and like too many cooks, not enough chefs, as they say, sort of thing with it. And Rob was just pissed off, basically, like, you're all interfering too much, leave me alone.
Yeah.
But then he released his director's cut, which he apparently said he's still not happy with because of how much interference there was.
Really? Yeah.
But it's a better film. A sequel. I like the sequel, the director's cut of Rob Zombie. I think it's a really good sequel.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as like remakes go, I think the remake of Halloween, I think it's quite good.
I like that film. That's a good film. So I had a look as well. Other things that Toby Hooper had directed. Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
The TV series, Poltergeist.
Yeah, well, that apparently even to this day is a sore subject because Steven Spielberg, his name is over the title.
Yeah, it is.
And apparently he started directing it, but he left Toby to basically direct it.
Yeah.
But Toby never gets the credit of pretty much making that film.
Yeah.
It's always Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
Which I think is really piss poor. Because apparently Steven Spielberg wanted to make a haunted house film with Stephen King.
Yeah.
And they couldn't agree on a topic of like a subject that they could both agree on for this like horror film. So Steven Spielberg got in contact with Toby Hooper to make Poltergeist. Many years later, Stephen King made Rose Red. But I think Poltergeist is a fantastic film.
Yeah, it is a good film.
And again, with Poltergeist, which is strange, maybe it's a Toby Hooper thing, the skeletons in the grave that come out the ground were real.
Yeah.
And a lot of the bones and stuff in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre were real because it was cheaper than getting fake ones.
Yeah, I think there was a local slaughterhouse, wasn't there? And they used to just get like...
No, I mean human remains.
Oh, human remains.
Human
really?
remains, yeah. The human remains in Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Poltergeist were all real.
Were they?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think in Poltergeist, they were purchased from a local college that did like medical studies.
Autopsies and stuff.
Yeah, like for class.
Yeah.
So they got the remains from them, and that's why they always say like, the Poltergeist film was cursed and stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But yeah, same with Texas Chainsaw, the bones were real.
Yeah, God,
because it was cheaper than buying fake ones, which is just messed up.
That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine? I made it into a film 20 years after I died.
Wow. Make sure you give me a credit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that a lot of the meat, you know, all this you were talking about the dinner table bits of offal and whatnot.
Yeah.
That was all just from a local abattoir.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, it's an interesting film. The other thing that I wanted to touch on was, do you think that Leatherface is up there with the big slashers like your Jason Voorhees?
Big time, yes. And I think the problem with Leatherface is that he doesn't get the credit he deserves because pretty much so many of the sequels are bad.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the certain charms about them, but they've never been as successful as some of the Freddy sequels, as some of the Michael Myers sequels, some of the Chucky sequels. I just don't think they've ever really given it as much detail or thought to a proper sequel.
It has kind of ruined, to me, my view on the sequels of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's probably part of the reason why I've never bothered watching them, is they feel more like a curio that's always been a half-assed, low-budget attempt at... Whereas the sequels of things like Halloween and Freddy, I don't know, like Nightmare on Elm Street or the Jason films, they're legitimate Hollywood films.
Yeah, and they had a pretty decent budgets.
But the TCM sequels, for whatever reason, they always felt like a bit of a joke, and they're watched by horror fans. Yeah, but more as a curio rather than as like an enjoyable film that would have a mainstream appeal.
100%, and I totally agree with that. And I don't understand why, when you saw the original did so well and it has such a big following, why you wouldn't then put the time, effort, and money into actually making a decent sequel. Yeah. I mean, the remake got a decent budget. Yeah. Obviously, its sequel didn't do as good, and that's why they decided to leave it where it was. But the remake of it got a really good budget for it, and like you said, after that, all the budget just was very half-arsed.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
The 80s ones in particular.
Yeah, definitely. 100%, I agree with that.
But it's a shame, because the other thing is they left the film, at the end of the film, they left it very open to be able to do whatever they wanted. You know, the second one could have been a backstory type thing, or... Yeah. Because there was no ambiguity about whether or not Leatherface was still on the loose, they had a free rein to make a really great sequel, I think.
Well, his brother, the Hitchhiker, comes back in the sequel.
Yeah.
But he's played by a different actor. I can't remember what his name is now. And that actor played a different character in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. He's quite famous in the horror scene. I can't remember what his name is now. But yeah, he played him, and he has a steel plate in his head, and he's peeling skin off of this wired hanger, and it's so bizarre. Yeah, this, honestly. And like I said, the fact that at the end in this amusement park, because they're hiding in the bottom of an amusement park sort of thing, Leatherface and Dennis Hopper decide to have a chainsaw duel. Yeah, and it's just okay, I don't think that would work, but
I suppose it was the 80s. Anything could happen.
Pretty much like, you know what, the crazier the better, let's just do this.
Yeah.
You know, what's the craziest thing that these two could get up to? I know, they're going to have a chainsaw fight.
I'll have to watch it now.
It's weird. And yeah. It's like I said, you might enjoy it for its balls to the walls craziness, but it's what it is what it is. That's basically, yeah. Like I said, the sequel to Texas Chainsaw, it is what it is. It's balls to the walls crazy, and you might enjoy the chainsaw fight at the end. The lead in it, though, she does a pretty decent job, and she is in a lot of horror. I can't remember what her name was, because I didn't make notes of those because I wasn't going to go into details on the sequel, but watch it if you got a bored Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I might watch it on a nice sunny Sunday afternoon.
No, you need a day like today. You need dreary afternoon. You know, let's watch some, because Carla will hate it. I know Carla will hate it.
Yeah, I think she'd hate it.
Like, really would hate it. But she might like the stupidity of it at the same time. But well, we're nearly up to our hour mark now, so we probably should leave it there on the sequel to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I want to say a big thank you, Llewellyn, for coming on and talking pretty much nonsense about TCM with me, because you know what, why not? Spend an hour talking utter nonsense about the love of films.
I've really enjoyed it. If you want me back, I'll come back and we can do another film.
Everyone leave a comment on what me and Llewellyn could be talking about. So, well, thank you very much for listening, everybody, and leave us a comment as to what you'd like us to discuss next. On that note, stay creepy, and thanks for listening. Bye.